blissful, peaceful, and blessed Gaura Purnima to all our devotees. We are all fasting until moonrise today. And for devotees in Toronto, it's at 7:42 p.m. Today. And today is 28th of March, 2021, Sunday. On behalf of ISKCON Scarborough, I'd like to welcome each one of you to this very special virtual class by His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Prabhu has given several classes, as we know, for our congregation, and the recent classes that I can remember of is Becoming Independently Thoughtful, and the other classes be not close-minded, but or just open-minded, but broad-minded. And today, I'm not sure whether Prabhu has given us a topic, Lord Chaitanya, social reformer par excellence, but we will leave it with Prabhu to choose the topic that is relevant to today. And all our classes are recorded and posted on YouTube, and you can search by ISKCON Scarborough. And a little bit about Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. He's a monk and mentor and spiritual author, and he's completed his electronics and telecommunications engineering from the Government College of Engineering, Pune. He subsequently served as a software engineer in a prominent multinational software corporation. And he has also scored 2,350 out of 2,400 in GRE. So this is almost, impossible task for normal normal people, and gaining the top rank in Maharashtra, and seeing the prevalent problems of stress, depression, addiction, and overall misdirection, all caused by lack of spirituality. Prabhu was inspired to dedicate his life to the cause of sharing the spiritual wisdom, not just from Bhagavad Gita, but from the scriptures. And also Prabhu travels all over the world and, gives talks on spiritual subjects in wonderful, wonderful, famous universities that we all wanted to go to when we were young, Princeton and Harvard and Stanford, Cambridge, etc. And also in companies like Intel, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. So we are so grateful that Prabhu is able to give his time to us. And, all our favorite, as devotees know, two websites, GitaDaily.com and spiritualscientist.com. It's got wealth of information there. Whatever questions that we may have in our mind, all you have to do is go to Spiritual Scientist and search. That pretty big box shows up, and when you search whatever you're looking for, your answers are given by Prabhu already. So with that, we'll hand it over to Prabhu, and we'll take some chat questions later on. Prabhu, so if we can go a little later, that's okay today, because it's a very special day. We would like to hear from you as much as possible, based on the time that you have. And I know it's a little late. It might get later because you're giving this class live from India. So again, Prabhu, on behalf of ISKCON Scarborough, we'd like to welcome you to this virtual class. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Honored to be here with all of you. So on this sacred occasion of Gaur Purnima, so let's begin with some prayers now. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshitarine Pancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you today on the sacred occasion of Gaur Purnima. And I will try to throw light today on one aspect of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is often not talked about so much, that Lord Chaitanya as a social reformer par excellence. How he was not just a saint, he was not just an exalted devotee, but he was also a person who transformed society. So I have a PowerPoint here, which I'll be sharing, and I'll also be using the PowerPoint as a whiteboard. So I may add certain things in the PowerPoint as we discuss and as questions come up or as additional points come up during the talk also. So that's why I'm not making it full screen. I'm keeping it partially visible for everyone for me to edit here. So let's begin. So broadly, I'll be discussing three things. How Lord Chaitanya brought equality in a society that had over time become discriminatory. How his vision can help the world today, and how we can be a part of his mission. That's what we'll be discussing, 3 points. Now, Lord Chaitanya can be seen as a personality with many different aspects to himself. For example, he is a philosopher, and he was definitely a philosopher, wherein he spoke elaborate philosophy explaining the intimate message meaning of Vedanta Sutra. He talked about the highest, how love for God is the highest level of reality. And he was also a saint. Now, normally, saint and devotee might seem equal, but sometimes we use the word saintly devotees. So, devotee means anyone who has love for God, or anyone who is aspiring to develop love for God also. But saint means one who has actually developed very exalted qualities. So, sadhava sadhubhushana titikshava karunika surda. So, saints are very rare and exalted people. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a saint of the highest caliber. He was also a renunciate. It is said in Chaitanya Charitamrita that he is called as Vairagya Shiromani, that he manifested the greatest of renunciation. He was greatest sannyasi. The way he manifested renunciation was extraordinary. Then he's the founder of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So, although the teachings of love for Krishna in the mood of Radharani are there in the scriptures, they are hidden. So Lord Chaitanya gave us access to those teachings. And thus he is the founder of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And I'll talk about Gaudiya Vaishnavism a little later as we come back to it. But along with that, he's also a social reformer. He reformed society in a significant way during his time in the world. And also, he set up a legacy by which social reformation continues happening. Now, if we move ahead, let's begin with the first point, that all of us feel at some time or the other that something is wrong in the world. Sometimes we feel a lot of things are wrong in the world. In times like this, say with a pandemic bringing our normal life almost to a standstill, it becomes evident that things are wrong in the world. And even when we don't feel too many things are wrong in the world, still there are things which can be improved. So how do we transform the world? So one way is social reform. Social reform can be, nowadays, social justice is a very big thing in life, and in society, especially in the Western world, and increasingly in the Eastern world also, where any kind of inequality, any kind of systemic discrimination, that is strongly not only frowned upon, but strongly criticized and sometimes even violently opposed. So social reform is important. However, if there's only social reform, that means we try to change social conditions. It is short-lived. And I'll explain why as we move ahead. On the other hand, if there is only spiritual reform, what do I mean spiritual reform? That means we try to change ourselves spiritually. And that's all that we do. Then, yes, it will transform the world, but it will be too slow. And I'll explain why. The ideal situation is where we have both social reform and spiritual reform, by which the two move together in synergy. And we know Lord Chaitanya as a spiritual teacher, he brought about spiritual reform, but he also brought about social reform. And that synergy of both, changing ourselves internally and changing things externally, both together can have the most transformative and most enduring impact in the world. So we all, in our ways, we may have experienced some form of inequity in life, some form of injustice. And we wonder how could we live in a fairer world? Could we live in a better world? Could we contribute to making the world fairer and better? At least can we contribute to making our life, our own life better? These are questions we all ask at some time or the other. So let's look at this. This is an overall, this one figure is going to, in one sense, be the center point around which the whole class is going to revolve. So let's look at this now. Moving ahead, social reform. So what happens is when we do social reform, we change unfair external conditions to make the world a better place. So for example, say in the West, there was slavery, especially in America, there was slavery, and the blacks who were enslaved, they were removed from that, slavery was abolished. And that definitely makes the world a fairer place. In India, for example, there's caste discrimination because of a misunderstanding or misapplication of the Vedic system of Varnashram. And to some extent, through urbanization, through education, through various other factors, the caste influence has decreased substantially as compared to a few decades ago or a few centuries ago. So social reform does have a role. It does help. However, social reform without internal reform, without spiritual reform, it doesn't help much. In fact, an exclusive focus on social reform was what was done in the communist countries. If you consider, communism says that everything bad is there because society is filled with inequality, and we just have to bring about equality in society. And if we just do that, we will be able to solve all problems. So if people now they try, their idea is that even if people are acting in bad ways, they are acting in bad ways because they are subjected to bad environmental conditions. But it's not that simple. This is a hypothetical experiment which describes the inadequacy of social reform, and according to some reports, it was even tried in the communist countries. So what was that? Basically, that they said that in school, for example, let's decide that let all students get the same grade, get the same marks. We want equality in society. So let's begin with equality in the classroom. So how do we ensure that everybody gets the same marks? They said that if you have a class, different students will naturally perform differently, but take the marks of all the students, divided by the number of students, get an average of everyone's score. Now, what happened when they tried this? The students who would never study, or who would study very little, they started studying even less. They stopped studying entirely. Anyway, we are going to get decent marks, better than what I would otherwise get. So, and why should I bother to study? And students who actually study hard and who were intelligent enough, they thought, even if I study, I'm not going to get really good marks. I'm only going to get average. So why study? So everything crumbled. So just like imposing reform onto society without actually creating an internal change. The students individually also have to take the responsibility to study. And similar in society, there might be discrimination, there might be inequality, and something might be systemic. But there might be many times people are in a bad situation because of their own bad choices. So if there is no internal reform, then what happens? People just continue to be bad, a kind of difficult situation, even when society provides them facilities. So sometimes there are welfare countries where sometimes people take welfare from the government and they use that as an excuse for even seeking a responsible job, doing anything responsible in their life. They just maybe stone themselves on drugs and waste time on various things. So yes, social reform is required to correct unfair external conditions, but it is not a complete solution to anything. There has to be inner change, and an inner change is what comes by spiritual reform. Now, what do we mean by spiritual reform? So it changes unsavory or unhealthy conditionings within us. These unhealthy conditionings means what? So we all have lust, anger, greed inside us, because of which we get into trouble. Now, according to some surveys, in many households in the West, especially in America, there are more TVs than there are people in the homes. And what happens because of this? That's just one indication that actually sometimes, even if people have comforts in their lives, they may not, even if they have wealth, they may not use the wealth properly. They don't even connect with each other. Why do we need more TVs than people? Because people cannot even come together to watch TV. I want to watch you. I want to watch this. I want to watch that. I don't want to sit and watch with you. So what happens is, even if there is wealth, if there is not much, if people's conditionings, it could be pride, it could be arrogance, it could be anger, resentment, envy, self-pity, whatever it is, these unhealthy conditionings, if they are not changed, then things don't improve. So there are unhealthy conditionings which prevent people from having a good life. So we need to change those unhealthy conditionings, and that is what is done through spirituality. Spiritual reform means the purity, the potency of the soul manifests from within and overcomes whatever conditionings are there, so that people become better internally. And when people are spiritually strong, then even in difficult situations, they will make healthy choices and they will grow. Now, so isn't spiritual reform good? Isn't our movement, we are meant for spiritual reform? So do we talk about social reform? Also, yes. Now, when spiritual reform means, if somebody thinks all that I will do is change my heart and not do anything else, then what happens is, it sometimes become inaccessible and ineffective socially. Why? Because say, if before Srila Prabhupada came to the West, there was a spiritual teacher from India who became quite well known in the West, and there was an article published about him in Time magazine about how he has great insights, and some journalist went to meet him in deep into the Himalayas. He went and met him, and he talked with him, and he said, you have so much wisdom, why don't you come to the West and share it with us? So he replied that when you are thirsty, you go to the river doesn't come to you. Now, that might seem to be like a statement from nature which is valid, but we are not just meant to act according to nature in every way. In nature, people don't dress. In nature, people don't get married. In nature, many living beings don't take care of their progeny much. So do we do that? We don't imitate nature in every way. So we are meant to live in harmony with not just nature in the terms of physical nature in the outside world, but we are meant to live in harmony with our nature. And our nature is that we are parts of God, and we are meant to serve all living beings. So we might ourselves grow spiritually by our practices, but others may not grow much. Because if you're not sharing what we are doing, we transform ourselves internally and we try to share the resources by which others can transform themselves also. And moreover, if we look at ourselves, so if there is an exclusive focus on this alone, then it is inaccessible and ineffective. Actually, how many of us can focus only on spiritual reform? If all of us were told that, okay, don't do anything except chant the holy names, except worship the deities or study scriptures, nothing else, no services, no other services. Well, okay, we want to do things. We all have energy and we want to do things in the world also. So it becomes inaccessible and ineffective. Okay, a few people might be able to do it, but they will not be able to contribute to much to change in the world. That's why social reform and spiritual reform both together are the best. So let's try to understand in another way. So this philosophy, this first half of the class is philosophical to understand uh, what is Lord Chaitanya's vision and contribution. So as I said, spiritual reform has many aspects to it, but one primary aspect that is relevant to us is change conditionings. So we all have certain conditionings within us which need to be changed. And these conditionings can be changed how? By understanding who we are and accessing the potency of the soul, accessing the potency of God. On the other hand, there is social reform. So ideally speaking, if you see the arrow goes from here to here, that means the more people change their conditionings internally, the more they can work effectively to change conditions. So there were a few movies in India a few years ago which criticized religion. They said, why do people spend so much time on money on deity worship? Why don't they just feed the poor? So I had written a couple of books addressing the various questions raised in those movies in OMG and PK. So one of the points is said that, are the two necessarily competitors? Why do you want to compare the amount of money spent on temples with the amount of money people give in charity? If you want to compare amount given in charity, why not compare it with so many other things? If instead of producing a movie like that, if all the money used in producing a movie like PK or OMG, that was used to feed the hungry people, wouldn't it have contributed substantially to society? A lot to speak of replacing that money, even a part of the profit from that money was not given for charity. So why compare only devotion with charity? Why not compare entertainment with charity? So the IPL is going to start now in India, the Indian Premier League cricket. And the amount of money that is spent on the IPL in just about 50, 60 days. That, if it were distributed to the poor people of India, 1/10, according to some surveys, 1/10 of India's poor people would be able to have enough food throughout the year. So why not compare it that way? So the idea is that when people go to a temple and they see the deities being worshipped over there, the more beautifully the deities are worshipped, the more the heart gets purified. When the heart gets purified, then people become less selfish, less materialistic, more service oriented, more charitable. So when the conditionings are changed, conditions do change by that. So spiritual reform leads to an inside out method of social reform. And conversely, here the arrow is this way. If there is social reform, if the conditions are changed, that can help us to change our conditionings also. How is that? Say, for example, in the past, some of you may know that in Soviet Russia, there was a lot of persecution of religion in all forms, and even Hare Krishnas were persecuted. But now, after that Soviet government fell and communism ended, then there's an explosion of devotion. In Ukraine, in Russia, there are hundreds, thousands and thousands of devotees. In fact, in the International Gaur Purnima festival that is held in Mayapur, where Lord Chaitanya appeared, and the festival that is held at this time in Mayapur, often we have three groups of devotees. There are Indian devotees, there are foreign devotees, and there are Russian devotees. There are so many Russian devotees that they become a category in themselves. They are in one sense foreign, but there are so many of them. So then there are special translations for them and everything like that. So when the conditions are changed, sometimes some conditions may prohibitively make practicing bhakti prohibitively difficult. So extremely difficult. So then that also helps. So the ideal situation is where what? Both. There is social reform that promotes spiritual reform, and there is spiritual reform that promotes social reform. So both work together. That's what I said is a synergy, that both work together. And this is what Lord Chaitanya taught. This is what Lord Chaitanya provided. What he did was, he provided an opportunity for everyone to practice bhakti in a way that brought about both internal reform and social reform. So let's see how Lord Chaitanya did that. So Lord Chaitanya appeared in 1486 in Bengal, in India, and in Mayapur. And at that time, India was going through quite a turbulent phase. So the turbulent phase was that there was mostly Islamic rule in large parts of India. And while some of the Islamic rulers were relatively broad-minded, many were quite intolerant. So there's a lot of threat to temples and forms of devotional worship, as well as forms of general rituals and temples. And sometimes devotees lived in the religious people lived in a form of, lived in fear. Along with that, so while there were threats externally, there were threats internally also. That is, the caste system had become very rigid. It had become birth defined, and the Brahmanas often claim monopoly on all Vedic rituals, all Vedic studies, all Vedic teaching, and they themselves had become more ritual than spiritual. They had become more materialistic. So religion had become a tool for them to maintain their prestige rather than to raise their and others' consciousness. So in such a situation, Lord Chaitanya descended. So normally the Lord descends to what? Whenever there is a decline in dharma, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. That's when he descended. Now Lord Chaitanya did something extraordinary. Let's look at it. So what did Lord Chaitanya do? As a spiritual reformer, he gave the potent process of bhakti to powerfully remove inner conditionings. We will discuss a little later what is so potent about the process of bhakti that Lord Chaitanya gave. So he was a spiritual reformer, and there are many miraculous stories of his miraculous capacity to transform people's hearts. Probably the most celebrated among them is the story of Jagai and Madai. So it was Nityanand Prabhu in one sense who delivered Jagai and Madai, but Nityanand Prabhu saw himself as a messenger of Lord Chaitanya, as a missionary on Lord Chaitanya's behalf. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, he descended to the world to give this process of bhakti. And it is said that it's a very beautiful vision given the Chaitanya Bhagavat, that Lord Chaitanya came down from the spiritual world to this world, and he garlanded the whole world with a garland filled with bhakti, with the chanting, with the flowers of the holy names. That's how we offer the process of bhakti. So what happened was Lord Chaitanya was also a social reformer. What did he do? He challenged caste and religious barriers to take the message of bhakti far beyond conventional boundaries. So as I said, within the followers of the Vedic tradition, the word Hindu is not so much used. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's used on a few occasions where people use it as a contradistinct identifier as compared to the Muslims for whom the word Mlecchas is used. But among themselves, people may call themselves Vaishnavas, Shaivite, Shaktas, and other things. So even if we use the word Hindu or we use the broad word, the followers of the Vedic tradition, within them, there were caste barriers, and by which many people were not allowed to, some people were not allowed to chant certain mantras, some people were not allowed to study the scriptures, some people were not allowed to even come into the temples. So there are caste barriers. And beyond that, there are religious barriers. There are people who outside the Vedic fold, they were considered so impure that even if they threw water on someone or they ate some food and threw it on someone, then a person would be considered to be losing their caste. So then how would we consider them capable of being elevated? Now, these are not scriptural conceptions. These are just conceptions that came because of deviation from scripture that happened over time. Sakalene hamhata yogo nashtah parantapa. So by the power of time, things deteriorate. Entropy is a principle in material existence. Everything deteriorates with time. So that's just the way the world is. If there's anything certain in the world, then it is that nothing is certain, in the sense that nothing will stay the same. Things will change, and usually, unless we make a conscious effort, things will change for the worse. They won't automatically change for the better. If we are in our home and if we just leave the home, when we come back to the home again, it won't be beautifully designed. It'll be dirty, it'll be dusty, maybe run down. So that's what happened over time. Even the Vedic teachings were lost. So the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in such a time. Now, how was Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bringing about social reform? Let's look at a few aspects of it. So he agitated for the right for religious freedom. So Prabhupada would say that sometimes, actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur used the word. So he was the first person to launch a civil disobedience movement. If any of you studied or remember the history of India, there were 2-3 major movements. There was the non-cooperation movement, there was the civil disobedience movement, there was the Quit India movement, and eventually the British left India. So there was a Chand Kazi who was an atrocious ruler under the Nawab Hussain Shah, who himself was quite atrocious also. And at one time, what happened was he did not want the people to perform Harinam, to perform to Kirtan. So he came and he destroyed a Mridanga and threatened the devotees. And if you continue doing this Kirtan, then I will have you put in jail. I will destroy your families. And the devotees were terrified. And when Lord Chaitanya heard this, he was enraged. And he said, all of you assemble together and we will march to the Qazi's place. So when they planned that way, they all started marching. Did I just become muted, or was I muted for a long time?
No, just now, and then we are okay, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. So Lord Chaitanya, when he had such charisma that hundreds and thousands of people from various parts came together, and the Chand Kazi had thought that, hey, this is just these are a group of powerless religious people, and I can just persecute them, and who's going to challenge me? In general, what happens is, whenever we confront people, especially if somebody is arrogant, they tend to overestimate their own power and they underestimate their opponent's power. That is typical of the mode of passion, and mode of passion often degenerates to the mode of ignorance. So when Lord Chaitanya commanded, and hundreds and thousands of people came, they all started marching, they all chanting the holy names, and they marched up to the Qazi's place. And he was alarmed. He said, where do so many people come from? And they look furious. The Lord Chaitanya did not want any violence. So the Qazi was very respectful, and he talked with him, and he had a illuminating discussion with him. And the result of that discussion was that the Qazi, he realized that these are not just some people doing some, they're not some worshipping some false god. He realized that actually, ultimately, there's the one God, the same God who is being worshipped by all traditions. So he said that as long as I or my descendants will be ruling, nobody will oppose the Sankirtan of the holy names. And thus, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what he did was, despite having an oppressive ruler, he removed that iniquity. He removed that opposition, that oppression, and he provided religious freedom for people from the oppressive theocratic rule. But that was not all. As I said, there are multiple obstacles. So there was also obstacles within the followers of the Vedic tradition, where people were not allowed to practice bhakti, or where they were not allowed to practice many of the aspects of the Vedic devotion. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu opened the doors of the doors of the treasury of love of God. Sthana na dekhi patra. He did not see anything. He asked everyone to chant the holy names. And again, it was So munificent was he, so compassionate, that he, that even people from, at that time the caste hierarchy was quite rigid, but even people from lower castes, he encouraged them, he invited them to chant. And when they would start chanting, he would be so happy, he would embrace them. He just flouted all conventional norms. Many of the conventional norms he just neglected. And sometimes his actions were stunning to people. They were shocking for some people. They were uh, they were delightful for some people. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was focused on simply inspiring everyone to develop their spiritual potential, to manifest the latent godliness, to relish love for Krishna, and then to give everyone the opportunity to love Krishna. So even people who were considered outlaws, people, there some of them, like the Pathan, some of them. Now, Pathan is at one level ethnic designation, but in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that is the Pathan Vaishnavas. They're talking about some people who were in some ways outlaws. But even them, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu elevated. Yet everybody can have the access to devotion. This is actually the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Mami partha vyapashritya ye pisyu papayonaya. Whoever it may be, whatever be the birth they may have, birth is no disqualification for devotion. That is the key point. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in one sense, walked the talk. He taught how to walk the talk that was done by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. And not only that, Lord Chaitanya, he also provided a facility for future generations to access bhakti. See, many times somebody might come and they might reform, but what after they depart? So they reform, but after they depart, society deforms again. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu created a legacy. How did he create a legacy? By entering deep into the hearts of his followers and inspiring them to continue his mission. So that's how he did so. And he made prophecies. At that time, when Lord Chaitanya departed, Gaudiya Vaishnavism was there mainly in the bhakti tradition that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had started. That was there in more or less in Bengal, substantially in Bengal, substantially in Orissa, substantially in Manipur. But beyond that, it was not there much. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu created a legacy. And he made prophecy that in future, a Senapati Bhakta will come, a great devotee will come, and he will carry on this mission. So he made prophecy that will happen. And he sent Prabhupada, as we'll discuss later, and he is giving us opportunities. So now, so when I said Lord Chaitanya did certain things, he created a legacy in which we all have opportunity to enrich ourselves and enrich others. So what was the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, by which he could break caste and religious barriers? Let's look at that. So in today's world, inclusion is a big theme. That there should not be any discrimination. Nobody should be left out. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had a very inclusive message. Now, whatever be anybody's externals, he said, everybody is a part of Krishna. Everybody is intrinsically divine. So there are some people, sometimes the vision was that some people are of a particular, they may have particular culture, they may have particular behavior, they may have particular race or genealogy, and that disqualifies them. He said, no, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went beyond it all. And he said that everyone is a part of Krishna. So it's ironical that when Lord Chaitanya appeared, it's the Vedic society, it gets the power of time, that actually Advaitavad was present in the Vedic tradition in India to a large extent. And if you consider the Upanishads and the broad Vedic tradition, it does teach that actually everything is ultimately spiritual. Everyone is essentially spiritual. Sarvam kalma vidam brahma, or aham brahmasmi. So in one sense, the universality of spirituality is taught far more in the Vedic tradition than in any other tradition. So there is no such idea as a chosen people, that God comes only at a particular time and only a set of people are elevated, or only people who believe in a particular teacher are elevated. Now everybody is essentially spiritual. Aham Brahmasmi, that is the truth for everyone. So in one sense, there is the Vedic message is most inclusive among the various religious traditions in the world. And yet, within that same tradition, one of the most rigid, religiously justified systems of hierarchy and discrimination had been created. So the caste system was, as I said, a misapplication of the Vedic tradition, Vedic teachings, but still it was justified using the Vedic teachings. And the idea was that if you are born in a lower caste, that means that must be because you have done bad karma in the past. And if you had done bad karma in the past and you are suffering in poverty, you are having difficulties, well, that's your karma, just suffer it. Now, this is a very heartless way of looking at it. We are not meant to judge people based on their past karma. No, we are meant to act based on our present dharma, not people's past karma. I repeat this, that we are meant to act based on our present dharma, not people's bad karma. So let's take a most extreme example of this. Say a newborn baby is crying. Now, should the mother think at that time, oh, this baby is crying because she is in pain, and she is in pain because she must have done some bad karma in the past? Well, if we start ascribing everybody's distress to their past life's bad karma, where will be justice? Where will be love? Where will be compassion? That would be lost. So a mother shouldn't be thinking that whether my baby has done some bad karma or not. Mother should be thinking, what is my dharma right now? My dharma is to help people, to help my baby, to take care of my baby. So when there's a pandemic right now, is this pandemic because of mass karma? Well, those who are at the front line of medical research, those who are working to save people's lives, they have to think, what is our dharma right now? So this idea that if people are suffering because of the past karma, let them continue suffering. This is a complete misapplication of the Vedic teachings. The same Vedic tradition gives Ayurveda. If all our sickness is because of our past karma, then why create a system of medicine to heal people? So what happens is that the Vedic teachings were highly misapplied and many people were considered disqualified. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, everyone has the potential to love Krishna. And not only do they have the potential to love Krishna, but they also have the right to access the process by which to love Krishna. Now, love Krishna doesn't just mean, Krishna is not just a sectarian deity of a particular cult. Krishna is the highest reality. Krishna manifests reality in its zenith. And when we love Krishna, when we love the highest reality, we manifest our highest potential. Now, Krishna doesn't just exist high up. By loving Krishna, we rise high up. We rise high up means we become purer, we become wiser, we become stronger, not in philosophy, but in resilience, in resolution, in resourcefulness. And that means we all can become better than what we are. So that everybody has the potential to enrich themselves internally and then to enrich others. This is Lord Chaitanya's inclusive message. When Srila Prabhupada came to the West, that was his message also. That he wanted to offer love for Krishna to everyone. He said, when Prabhupada came back with several buses of his disciples to Vrindavan in early 1970s. So for Vrindavan, it is like a hometown Swami become an international celebrity. They had big programs to felicitate him. And some of the local spiritual teachers over there, they were a little envious. And they tried to minimize Prabhupada. They said that, Bhaktivedanta Swami, he was a businessman earlier. And that's how he knew how to deal with various kinds of people, how to manage an enterprise. And that's how he was able to start his organization. He was able to engage all these low-class people. But, we Naishtik brahmacharis, we sannyasis from childhood. We have always lived very purely. But anyway, he's done great work. He's done good work and we appreciate it. So this is called damning by faint praise. So we appreciate in such a way that that appreciation comes out as an insult. Suppose somebody invites us for prasad at their place, and they serve prasad and we take it. They ask, how is the prasad? And suppose we say, it was edible. Edible? What do you mean? It was delicious? No, it was edible. So it is damning by faint praise. It is actually offering such a praise that it comes out to be criticism. So they try to do like this. Now, what Prabhupada's response was, and actually what Prabhupada's understanding was, okay, you are simply seeing the material factors. Oh, these people were low-born. But Prabhupada did not see those material factors. Prabhupada saw the soul. Every soul is a part of Krishna. Every soul, beyond their conditionings, has the potential to love Krishna. And that was the vision of Srila Prabhupada when he came to America, and on the Jaladuta, he composed the song Markini Bhagavad Dharma. So he said that anybody who hears Krishna Katha can become purified. Bhagavatera Katha se tab avatar, dhirhaya shunya jadi kane bar bar. If one just hears the Bhagavad Katha regularly, anybody can become purified. Anybody can become free from the world's illusions. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings were embodied by Srila Prabhupada. So there are two things. First is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had that understanding that everybody has the potential within them to love Krishna, and then everybody has the right to access that process by which they can develop their potential to the fullest. So when we talk about loving God, it is not just internal spiritual achievement. When we love God, actually that love of God becomes a very powerful energy by which we contribute in the external world, and we bring about significant changes in the outer world. So Srila Prabhupada was appreciated by many of the social civic authorities in America, that he was able to transform these hippies, whom even the American government didn't know what to do with, but Prabhupada was able to elevate them and make them self-disciplined, make them responsible, make them lead constructive, evolved lives. So this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's inclusive message was. And then it's one thing to offer a message. That's wonderful. But it all sounds good, but it doesn't seem accessible to me. So is there a way to not just offer a message, but also to provide access to it? So Lord Chaitanya offered mercy also. And what is Lord Chaitanya's mercy? So this will be the concluding part of the talk. There's 3 parts in it. He offered unprecedented access to Krishna. So what do we mean by that? He gave a most powerful transformation tool. Then he gave most widespread access. And he gave most elevated destination. Let's see what this means. So the most powerful transformational tool. What is that? He offered the glorification of Krishna through the very simple way of chanting his holy names. The glorification of Krishna can be done in various ways. Like now, there is a discussion about the philosophy of Krishna Bhakti, of Krishna Tattva right now happening. And then you're hearing, this is also glorification of Krishna. This is Shravanam and Kirtanam. Now, there are various ways in which we can glorify Krishna. We can glorify him through elaborate philosophy. We can glorify him through telling his pastimes. And we can glorify him in a very simple way by chanting his holy names. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Always glorify Krishna. Now, what happens when we glorify Krishna? We access God's omnipotence. Because Krishna is not different from his holy names. Krishna is not different from his message. So when we speak Krishna's message, when we hear Krishna's message, what happens is Krishna himself becomes manifest in our heart. And we all want to transform ourselves. We all want to do something to transform things in our world. By our own small power, we can do something. But if God's omnipotence is there, then how much more can we do? And when we glorify Krishna, something more happens. We experience God's benevolence. Benevolence means how God is our well-wisher. See, what happens in the normal course of our life, sometimes good things happen in our life, something bad things happen. As they say, kabhi khushi, kabhi gum. So life seems to be just going on. And although the idea is kabhi khushi, kabhi gum, but we often find that there is more gum than khushi. That there are lots of problems that come in our life. And we may think, where is God? So what happens is sometimes we get a tunnel vision and we are unable to see the big picture. But when we hear about the Lord's pastimes and how there are so many great devotees far greater than us who went through difficulties, and they went through difficulties far bigger than us, but eventually they were delivered, they were glorified. The Lord, through all those difficulties, was taking them to a better place. When we understand that, when we see that enacted in the Lord's pastimes, we start seeing our life in terms of a bigger picture. And then we start seeing, yes, God is acting in my life. Yeah. If we look at our own lives and we look at wherever we have come till now, yes, we may have worked hard, but we all got some lucky breaks. Some things worked out right. So right now, I may face this problem and that problem. But if we are simply alive, whatever be our age right now, there are so many people who die before they get to our age. So if we are just alive, then there are more things right than wrong in our life. And those things are not right simply because we made them right. No, there is a higher being beyond us who is ensuring our existence. So we can experience God's benevolence by hearing the glories of Krishna. And then the glorification of Krishna also manifests God's transcendence. That means what? That even amidst our difficulties, if we hear about Krishna, we speak about Krishna, we find our consciousness rising upward. We find ourselves sheltered. We find ourselves protected. Madashraya katha amrishta shrunvanti kathayanti cha tapanti vividhastapa naitan madgata chetasaha. The Bhagavatam says that if we absorb ourselves in Krishna's glories, then even if the world's distresses come upon us, they don't hurt us. It's like Krishna consciousness becomes like a bulletproof armor for us. The world's problems may hit us like bullets, but if we have put on the armor of Krishna consciousness by our sadhana, by our swadhyaya, by our satsang, by studying scriptures, by chanting holy names, by absorbing ourselves in Krishna's glories, then the world's problems won't trouble us so much. We will realize that we can rise above the world's problems. Our tolerance, our resilience increases substantially. So it's a very powerful transformational tool. Access to Krishna's glories. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu provides us that through the holy name, through the Harinam and through the Harikatha. Now we may say the Harinam, wasn't it available? Was the Harikatha not available? Before it was available, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu propagated it very widely. He was the person who popularized the congregational chanting of the holy names, by which anybody and everybody can actually experience something divine, something transcendental. And not only that, as I said, he also offered the most widespread access. So glorification of Krishna is there, but we all may want to glorify Krishna, but how can we glorify Krishna? We need to know his glories. So as I mentioned, no barriers of caste, religion, or gender, no barriers of history or geography, no barriers of intellectual ability or ritual expertise. One doesn't have to be a Brahmana who knows Shastra or who can do a lot of rituals. Everybody can glorify Krishna. So that access was provided to everyone. And Srila Prabhupada also followed in Prabhupada's in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's footsteps. And then we are discussing Lord Chaitanya's mercy now. So he offered the most elevated destination. What is that most elevated destination? That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu helped us glorify as glorification of Krishna in various ways. One is that the potency of the glorification of Krishna, the accessibility of the glorification of Krishna, but also within that the content. What are we glorifying when we are glorifying Krishna? Krishna in Vrindavan, Krishna as Shyam Sundar, Krishna as Gopijan Vallabha. This is the most endearing revelation of divinity. There are many religious traditions which talk about God, but the conception of God is not very clear, if at all it is there in those religious traditions. In the Bhakti tradition, and especially in the Krishna Bhakti tradition, and even within that, within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there's a very intimate conception of God. So there was a infamous atheist, Friedrich Nietzsche. He said that he had he was so fed up with the conception of God, who always seems to be very prohibiting people. So he was fed up with that conception of God. There's a gag against the Abrahamic conception of God. So in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it said that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So the idea is that the sacred words are manifested from God. That's a simple explanation of that. But what atheists or those who are fed up with this, with the restrictive conceptions of God, is that in the beginning was the word, and the word was no. Word was no. That means don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. So he was so fed up with this kind of conception of God that he said, I will believe in only a God who knows how to dance, or I only believe in a God who dances. But unfortunately, he did not know about Krishna. He did not know about Lord Chaitanya. Krishna danced in Raslila. Krishna danced on even the hoods of Kaliya. And whereas Krishna danced occasionally, Lord Chaitanya danced constantly. And Lord Chaitanya is also, Krishna is God as God, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is God as devotee. So such an endearing revelation of divinity is there. If we just come to know Krishna, how can one actually not fall in love with Krishna? And not only that, beyond that, there is a most intimate experience of love for divinity. That means there are various kinds of relationships. Mostly it is in the Abrahamic religion that God is the master and God is the father and we are his children. God is the master and we are his servant, something like that. But Bhakti reveals so many intimate relationships. We can be the friend of God. We can be the parent of God. We can be the lover of God. And these are unparalleled revelations. So we can have a real relishable relationship with the divine. And just understanding this, appreciating this makes us that Lord who loves Mother Yashoda, who loves the gopis, who loves Sudama. That Lord is present in my heart, wanting me to love him, waiting for me to love him, working for me to love him. Why should I turn away from him? This is the message that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave to anyone and everyone. And then finally, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself revealed the most disarming divine abode, the abode of Golok Vrindavan. So that there is Krishna, then there is the especially the Madhurya Ras, and there is Golok Vrindavan. So these three things are, the first is the revelation of God as Krishna in Vrindavan, then there is the Madhurya Ras, and there is the vision of Golok Vrindavan. Now in Golok Vrindavan, it is Krishna doesn't act as if he is God. Krishna submits himself to love. So for reciprocating love with his devotees, if he has to become subordinate, he becomes subordinate. Just to have relational pastimes with Mother Yashoda, he actually lets himself be tied up. So this is the endearing vision of divinity that Lord Chaitanya offered. And when we understand this, then we also become attracted. We also feel inspired to love the Lord and to enter into that world of love. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has provided access to us to all this. So how can we become an instrument for Lord Chaitanya's transformational mission? That Lord Chaitanya has come to transform our heart internally, spiritual reform in our hearts, and make us agents for social reform in the outer world. So we savor Krishna's glories. Whatever opportunities we have to hear his holy names, to hear him, to read scriptures about him, to hear classes about him, to worship him as deities, we savor Krishna's glories. And as we savor reform internally, and then we share Krishna's glories. There are many ways we can share glories. We can distribute books. We can speak about Krishna's wisdom. We can even just behaving in a responsible, respectful, sensitive way with others. Just Prabhupada was asked once, how do we know your followers? And Prabhupada said they are perfect gentlemen and ladies. That means if a devotee behaves in a responsible, courteous, virtuous way, then that itself is a glorification of Krishna. And when we share Krishna's glories, that brings about social reform. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that when he came to Varanasi, that was devotionally barren place. And he said, I want to give these fruits, mangoes, which are rich with love for Krishna. But there are so many mangoes, I alone cannot distribute it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called forward, can you assist? And those who assisted in distributing the mangoes to others, they themselves got the mangoes more and more. They relished the mangoes more and more. And in that way, Lord Chaitanya has provided us all the opportunity that if we consider mango is considered in some ways the king of fruits, the sweetest of fruits. And the sweetest among all emotions that the human heart can experience is love for God. And love for God can be in various manifestations, but love for Krishna is the highest, the sweetest. So that mango of love for Krishna, Lord Chaitanya is distributing. And each one of us has the opportunity to savor that, that love for Krishna and then to share that love for Krishna. So that is the purpose why Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu descended into this world in some nearly 550 years ago. And that is the purpose why Srila Prabhupada traveled across the world in his old age to share Lord Chaitanya's message. And that is the prayer that we all can offer to Lord Chaitanya today. That may he bless us so that we can savor the glories of the Lord whom he worshipped, who he was devoted to, who he himself actually was. That maybe we savor his glories and then maybe share those glories. That will be the ultimate blessing of Gaur Purnima, of the Lord's manifestation in this world, so that there may be his manifestation in our hearts more and more. So I'll summarize what I spoke today, and then we can have one or two questions if there are any. So today I spoke on the theme of Lord Chaitanya as a social reformer par excellence. So I talked about how we all feel that there are things wrong in the world which need to be improved. And how do we go about improving them? So one extreme is social reform, where we try to remove unfair conditions. But the problem with that it is too short-lived. That just providing better conditions doesn't necessarily help. So if we just say, let everybody get equal marks in class, well, we are removed inequality. But for how long? People have to take responsibility. People have to change internally. So it is too short-lived. On the other hand, if there is spiritual reform where people address their conditionings within, whatever prevents them from acting to their full potential, and that is good. But if somebody only focuses on their own inner transformation and doesn't do anything for society, then it's like it remains inaccessible for most people, and it is not it is not very effective for society. Because how many people can actually follow like that and focus entirely on their own spiritual transformation? So it is compassion means not just that the thirsty person goes to the river, but actually the river comes to the thirsty person. And the ideal situation is both social reform and spiritual reform together. That we reform ourselves by practicing bhakti, so that we transform the conditionings with our heart, and then we share Krishna's glories with others. We share bhakti wisdom with others, so that they can also transform themselves. So social reform and spiritual reform can be synergistic together. And then we discuss how Lord Chaitanya manifests that. So Lord Chaitanya, as a spiritual reformer, he provided the potent practice of bhakti for transforming the hearts of everyone. And then, but he was also a social reformer. How a social reformer? In a society where there was religious persecution by the non-Vedic rulers, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu campaigned for the right for religious freedom through the first civil disobedience movement. And he got that through his fearless campaigning. And then even within the Vedic tradition, there was a caste barriers, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu campaigned against that also. And he gave access to the essential teaching of the Vedas, the essential practices of the Vedas to every single person. And he didn't just campaign like that, his teachings were like that. What were the teachings? That rather than looking at external designations, he said that everyone is a part of Krishna. And while that idea that everybody is spiritual was there in the scriptures, but society at that time had become so stratified that that essential teaching was lost. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, not only everybody is a part of Krishna, everybody has the potential to love Krishna. Nobody's conditionings are so buried that they cannot be accessed at all. And everybody also has the right to access the process for loving God. Now, God or loving Krishna is not just becoming fanatic about some particular sectarian conception of God. God is the highest reality. And when we love God, we are able to manifest our highest potential. So then we discussed about Lord Chaitanya as a as a social reformer, what did he do? He gave access to the most potent transformational tools. He gave the most widespread access, and he offered the maximum fruit through that. So what was that process? The glorification of Krishna. For those who want philosophy, he offered elaborate philosophical glorification of Krishna. But for those who didn't want or couldn't accept, he just chants and sing Krishna's glories. By that you can elevate yourself. So it's something universally accessible. Then it's a very potent transformational tool because it gives us access to Krishna's omnipotence, his benevolence, and ultimately his transcendence. So even amid difficulty, our consciousness can raise up by glorifying Krishna. Then he broke down all barriers of gender, of caste, of religion, of history, of geography. He created a legacy by which that glorification of Krishna could be spread far and wide. And then beyond that, he also offered the most elevated destination. That is, when we want to glorify God or glorify Krishna, the most intimate revelation of devotee, that is Krishna as Shyam Sundar. And not only that, Krishna, the Madhurya Ras that can be experienced in relationship with Krishna. And that too also in Golok Vrindavan, where Krishna doesn't reign supreme. Krishna lets Prema, love reign supreme. And it is that revelation that Lord Chaitanya has offered for all of us. So we all can become an instrument in Lord Chaitanya's inclusive transformational vision. How? First, by savoring Krishna's glories internally, so that there is spiritual reform, and then sharing Krishna's glories externally, so that there is social reform. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. That was amazing class, really, beautiful class. And it sets us nicely for participating in today's Gaura Purnima celebration. When devotees have read Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Mangal, and definitely Chaitanya Charitamrita, but we wouldn't have got the insights that you gave us today, and that actually sets us in a beautiful mood to read these scriptures as well, knowing what you presented about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did social reforms as well as spiritual reforms. So wonderfully, wonderful class, Prabhu. So we are very, very thankful for you to have come on live and given this class from India. So there is one question. This is from Amal Prabhu. Prabhu's very happy with the class, amazing class. Prabhu, did Chand Kasi become a Vaishnava? That's his question.
Okay. So the answer would be yes and no. So it is described that there are different people who may manifest bhakti in different ways. So for example, Srila Prabhupada preached to very influential people. Say for example, Srila Prabhupada, one of the persons who was influenced by Srila Prabhupada was George Harrison. He was enormously influenced by Srila Prabhupada. But when he started writing all songs only about Krishna, what happened was people had certain expectations from him, and when he was not fulfilling their expectations, actually people started criticizing him, and they said because of his Krishna devotion, he is doing anti-preach. He is now just wasting his talent. He's no good anymore. And then he talked with Prabhupada, and he said that Prabhupada, I'm feeling as if for every one person I am bringing closer to God, to Krishna, I'm becoming the cause for driving 1,000 people away from Krishna. So to just get a simple example to understand this, in India, cricket is almost like a religion. Say suppose a top cricketer, maybe like Sachin Tendulkar is now retired, but say Virat Kohli or somebody becomes a devotee. And then there is the World Cup final between India and Pakistan, and say India lose. And then after that, in the post-match conference, say Virat Kohli is interviewed, he says, actually it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Can you imagine the amount of anti-preaching that would happen by that? If you are a professional cricketer, you have to perform as a cricketer. Yes, your spirituality is a part of your life. So for some people, manifesting their spirituality externally can backfire, not only for them, but even for broader society. So George Harrison, the way he portrayed in his life was that there was a phase in his life when he was with the Hare Krishnas, but afterward he gave up that. That was the infatuation for him. So in his interviews with Mukunda Maharaj in the book Chant and Be Happy, he says that he calls himself like a plain clothes devotee or a closet devotee. So he said that's the way he was able to. Wrote many songs, and in some of the songs he kept bringing in Krishna Bhakti, little bit. So he was able to have a greater social influence by not manifesting his devotion publicly. So similarly, in the case of Chand Kazi, what happened is that he was convinced by, yes, what Lord Chaitanya, what you're telling is true. But he said, I cannot, for the sake of externals, I have to conform. I have to conform with the externals. What happens is there are sometimes in trying to gain one victory, we might attract so much opposing forces that we may end up causing more harm than good. So, for example, even now there are Islamic countries where you cannot, there is no other religion that is officially allowed. If there are followers of those religions, they can practice bhakti. If there, say in the Middle East, there are Muslims, say there are Hindus, there are Christians, they may be allowed to practice their religion, but they cannot preach. It's a serious offense. And so suppose in the Middle East or in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, devotees, if they preach and some Muslim becomes a devotee. So I talk with teachers in those countries, and they say that if some Muslim becomes a devotee, now I'm not saying this about all Muslims in all parts of the world. In some parts of the world, I'm saying that what happens is that the whole community will become an enemy, and both the preacher and the preached have to disappear. Otherwise, they will disappear. They will just destroy the whole temple, destroy the whole mission. So if the Chand Kazi had externally got converted, that would have outraged the Muslim community. And Nawab Hussain Shah was already a tyrannical ruler. He would have descended and crushed the Vaishnavas. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also didn't expect or demand from him external conformity with Vaishnavism. So everybody has to practice according to their position. It is so for some people who are in very big positions, if they start publicly manifesting their devotion, then what happens is it can backfire. There was an American president a few decades ago who very publicly professed his devotion to God. And he said publicly that God has told me to attack this country. We are fighting God's war. And eventually what happened is when he committed some mistakes, then he not only was he blamed for it, but his religion and his religious guides and the whole religious tradition was blamed for it. So that's why the Chand Kazi, he did appreciate Lord Chaitanya's wisdom. He even, at least from the conversations that we had, did appreciate Lord Chaitanya's divinity. But sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. That means courage is not just in openly, fearlessly doing, in not recklessly doing something, but is also being calculated in terms of what is the best way ahead. So for the sake of external conformity, he did not manifest his devotion, but he did appreciate Lord Chaitanya. So in that sense, internally he did become a devotee. He also had darshan of Lord Narasimhadev, who came and told him, don't interrupt my devotees' practice of glorification of me. So he definitely became transformed, but he didn't externally manifest that transformation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Maybe another question, Prabhu, we can wrap this beautiful session with this general question that came through chat, private chat. So for a newcomer, well-established devotees, for example, in their altar, they will have Gauranitai, Radha Krishna deities, Jagannath Baladev, Subhadra deities, Narsimhadev, etc. Typically, they have that and they do the worship. But for newcomers, it is said that they start worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu. But also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says worship Lord Krishna, even though they are same. So what would be your guidance for a newcomer as far as worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda Prabhu by worshipping, by glorifying Lord Krishna? If you can give some guidance on that.
Okay. So when some newcomers come to the practice of bhakti, and then they see Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda on the altar also. So how can they practice bhakti? There is Shraddha that has to be gradually cultivated. So faith and devotion, they can never be mandated or imposed. That has to be organically manifested. So when someone starts practicing bhakti, whatever manifestation of divinity they're attracted to. So if they've not heard about Lord Krishna, they've not heard about, when Prabhupada came to the West, people had not even heard about Krishna. So Prabhupada first talked about Krishna. Although Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is much more merciful, Prabhupada talked about Krishna first. In fact, Prabhupada talked simply about the body and the soul initially, and gradually started to talking about Krishna. Eventually, he introduced Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he introduced Jagannath. So now, of course, we have established movements. So we have altar with various deities. But the point is that the operating principle in devotion is yena kena prakarena mana Krishna niveshana. Somehow or the other, fix the mind on Krishna. So if somebody is attracted to Krishna, that's wonderful. If somebody is attracted to Ram, that's wonderful. If somebody is attracted to Narasimhadev, people from certain parts of the world, especially South India, Narasimhadev worships quite a lot. That's wonderful. So we don't have to, at that time, emphasize the difference between all of them. Whichever manifestation of the divinity you are attracted to, and of course, we can speak about how Krishna is God at home, how Krishna has multifarious relationship with his devotees. We can also talk about what is it? We can also talk about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where he is the Mahavadanya avatar. However, while we talk about this, we don't have to conceal, but at the same time, we don't have to emphasize or insist. Whatever a person sees inspired to worship, they can worship. And of course, with respect to home, which deities to have and other things, that is something which there may be particular standards to be followed for deity worship. That is to be considered. But the point is that if somebody says, I don't have, I've heard about Krishna. Krishna is God, but Lord Chaitanya, I never heard of him. Is he really God? Well, if somebody has that, then we don't have to say, how can you not accept Lord Chaitanya as God? Scriptures tell it. Yes, we can talk about scriptures, no doubt. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his book on Lord Chaitanya's teachings, has a very inclusive approach to this. So he says that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed many miracles. And for the Vaishnavas, these miracles are evidences that he's the supreme divinity, that he's God. However, miracles themselves are no proof of divinity. Even demons like Ravan perform miracles like changing their forms. So he said, we leave it to our esteemed readers to decide for themselves the question about Lord Chaitanya's divinity. But what we request everyone, I'm paraphrasing his words here, what we request everyone is that consider the process of love of God that he has offered everyone. Practice that process and experience the ultimate enrichment. Experience a flood of love of God in your heart. And that experience of love of God is the ultimate miracle. So rather than insisting that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is God or debating it too much, you focus on, okay, whether you accept Lord Chaitanya or God or not, as God or not. But ultimately, it is a broad Vedic teaching to chant the holy names of the Lord, to chant Krishna's names. So chant those. And Lord Chaitanya has taught them. So even if somebody can't accept Lord Chaitanya as God, even if they accept him as a great devotee, as a great spiritual teacher, and that he is accepted by all traditions, even other Vaishnava traditions and even other non-Vaishnava traditions, quote some of Lord Chaitanya's teachings, especially the Shikshashtakam and some of his other teachings. So you understand his teachings and apply the process of bhakti that he has given. And once we start experiencing the transformation in our heart, once we start experiencing how many of our conditionings, our unwanted habits start going away, how lust, anger, greed start dropping, how negativity starts going away, how we start experiencing enrichment the way we had never experienced before. How amid difficulties that would have crushed us earlier, we find inner strength, we find resilience. Then that itself gives us conviction. Okay, if this process has so much power, then maybe the teachings also have some validity. And maybe Lord Chaitanya really be God. Otherwise, how would this process have so much potency? So faith can develop organically. So that's why rather than emphasis while teaching in the classes, we can of course talk about Lord Chaitanya's divinity, but while interacting on a one-to-one people, we don't have to demand or insist. We don't demand or impose faith. We can't do that. We just have to encourage the practice of the process as is appropriate for them, as they feel attracted to. And by that, the transformation will happen. And that will be the soundest foundation for faith. Does it answer the question?
Beautifully, so grateful to you for again this wonderful, wonderful class that sets us up nicely going forward as well. When we read these scriptures, this will come into our mind. Beautiful, Prabhu. Thank you so much.